One of the things we have to remember is that diseases or syndromes or patient issues, whichever of those three you're trying to deal with in a clinical setting, that what the patient might be suffering through is not always an active infection. Sometimes they have just ingested the wrong thing. Take, for instance, food poisoning. Okay, food poisoning is not always they drank a chemical from under the sink that they shouldn't have, or some stupid teenager decided to make an Instagram post or a TikTok post of them chewing down on a Tide Pod. No, sometimes, a lot of the times, it's a patient is eating something that at one point in time had an active bacterial growth on it and or in it. They did what they were supposed to do. They cooked the meat all the way through. They thought they washed the vegetables. They cooked the vegetables, but something was still there. If you look at bacteria such as Staphylococcus aureus, Bacillus cereus, Clostridium perfringens, and many other microbes that will be found interacting with or on fish, shellfish, mushrooms. What these microbes all have in common is the fact they manufacture exotoxins. Okay, a toxin, a protein-based compound that is secreted out of the cell into the environment. So the bacterial cell itself will be killed due to the application of heat during cooking, or the application of some cleaning or disinfecting chemical on the produce before you eat it. But neither of those has anything to do with damaging or denaturing the proteins that form the toxin. So this is where we get the idea of intoxication. You have ingested a toxin. You don't worry about the microbe, you worry about what the microbe produced. So you eat processed meats, undercooked meats, some form of sauce or custard or something that you're not applying a lot of heat to. Just enough heat to get it to set, maybe kill the vegetative cells, but not high enough heat to damage the toxin, because that would, burn, or it would cause the custard to break. So it's contaminated food. Food contaminated with toxins that when you ingest them, they will now wreak havoc on your gastrointestinal tract. Many of the toxins, the exotoxins, are heat stable. So you would have to put them in a boiling 100 degrees Celsius environment, boiling water, for at least 30 minutes. Okay, you're not going to cook very many vegetables or meats for 30 minutes at that temperature. You would boil them to the point where they are just basically rubber. You stir fry, you do a quick saute. The internal temperatures within the folds on the mushrooms is not going to get to that temperature. The custard, you're going to bring it up almost to a boil, but not quite, because to take it over the boil would cause the eggs to scramble, or would cause some of the dairy products that may be present to break. So that's how you get exposed to the Staphylococcus exotoxin. The exotoxin doesn't directly damage cells so much as it stimulates cells, stimulates the nerves that innervate the underlying muscles of your small and large intestine, the muscles that are responsible for peristalsis, causes them to beat in the wrong pattern, or beat and contract too hard, causing cramps. On the plus side, it's fast onset, fast to go away. Within 24 hours, all the toxin will be cleared from your system or from the patient's system, and they're okay. It's generally considered self-limiting. Going to see roughly the same thing with Bacillus cereus. Okay, it's not so much, the eating of the Bacillus vegetative cells. It's going to be ingestion of the spores, and the spores germinate in the small intestine, or the spores have germinated in a food, a home canned food, and you're eating the food out of the jar without reheating it, without taking it up to a high temperature. Because the exotoxin Bacillus cereus produces is another heat stable one. If you're one of those people who likes fried rice, for whatever reason, fried rice seems to be one of the leading sources for Bacillus cereus intoxication. What you're going to see is it's going to cause symptoms that's quite similar to the milder diarrhea diseases, but it's also going to induce vomiting. So from a clinical standpoint, patient presents to you in a clinic, hospital, ER, whatever, and they say, been having diarrhea for, on and off all day, there has been some vomiting. What have you been eating? Oh, we had this morning for breakfast, I decided to have the leftover fried rice from last night. Ding, 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 ding. This is what it is. What we found is when we trace it back to the source of the contaminant, the source that somebody has ingested. It's meats that are cooked and then held at temperature for long periods. Okay? On a steam table or in a pot for long periods. It's not kept at a high enough temperature to damage the toxin or to continue cooking the meat, but it's kept just at a warm enough temperature to keep the meat kind of warm. Okay, it's now into that, just at the top end of that red zone of, the food's not hot enough or the food's not cold enough. Again, treatment, fluids, tell them to, just keep drinking, keep replenishing, and it will clear up. It will self-clear within 24 hours. Clostridium perfringens, which is generally associated with wound. Remember, it was C. difficile, it was ingestion. Perfringens is generally associated with wounds. You get a puncture wound and the spores, perfringens spores, gets into the wound and it'll lead to a necrotic wound. Sometimes you get the spores by ingesting them. You ingest them because they're in or on some meat or fish that was handled incorrectly. Or maybe it's vegetables that still have some soil particulates on them. They weren't washed correctly. You're ingesting spores, endospores. So the normal cooking of the fish, the normal cooking of the vegetables, probably is not going to damage the endospore. As the food sits, it's cooling, spores will germinate. You come back half hour, hour later, whatever, couple hours later to eat the food. Maybe you pull it out of the fridge and you nuked it. Well, turns out the exotoxin that Perfringens makes that kills the tissues surrounding the puncture wound, well, Perfringens, the vegetative cell, is dead. Toxin, still there. For some people, they could actually ingest the living cells or the endospores. The endospores will pass through the stomach and will germinate in the small intestine. C. perfringens will then just start growing, producing the exotoxin in the small intestine. You'll absorb the exotoxin and it will do the damage there. We see this is an issue with small children. Okay, remember, small children, infants, don't feed them honey for just this reason.